Among shotgunners who have made their acquaintance, ruffed grouse consistently arouse the strongest passions. All agree that this partridge is the smartest, wildest, hardest flying, and altogether most challenging, frustrating, and lovable game bird on two wings. Such a bird deserves a passionate chronicler, and no man I've hunted with or whose stories I've read was more passionate about life, about writing, about friends, about hunting and fishing, about the outdoors in general, and about ruffed grouse in particular, than Frank Woolner. Woolner's life overlapped those of Burton L. Spiller, William Harden Foster, Gorham Grandpa Grouse Cross, and John Alden Knight, who all wrote timeless elegies to the ruffed grouse. Anybody who has read Spiller's Grouse Feathers and More Grouse Feathers, Foster's New England Grouse Shooting, Cross's Partridge Shortening, or Knight's The Ruffed Grouse will agree that Frank Woolner's Grouse and Grouse Hunting, published in 1970, deserves an honored place on the bird hunter's shelf, alongside those older classics. Mine is a love story, he wrote, a sometimes personal treatise on the game bird that is more important to me than wild geese coursing an autumn sky, than black ducks cupping their wings and dropping into the blocks, than woodcocks spiraling over the alders in the red hush of an October twilight. Like most outdoor writers of his generation, Frank Woolner was a generalist, a jack of all trades and a master of most of them. He spent his life in the New England out-of-doors, passionately devouring whatever the season offered. He hunted upland birds and waterfowl, rabbits and squirrels, foxes and deer. He cast flies and drifted worms for brook trout, and he heaved live eels and wooden plugs into the Cape Cod surf for striped bass. When no game or fish was in season, he tromped the fields and forests anyway, absorbing nature's stories. Back in the 30s and 40s, my father edited a sporting magazine called Hunting and Fishing. He bought Frank Woolner's first outdoor story and thereby helped to launch a career that lasted half a century. My father launched a lot of other careers too, and being the man he was, he usually ended up hunting and fishing with the writers he did business with. I was the lucky kid who got to tag along. Thus, I made the acquaintance of a whole generation of sporting writers, including Frank Woolner. I grew up believing that men like Frank Woolner had the best job in the world. He fished and hunted and called it research. He went out and had adventures, and then he wrote about them, and people gave him money for it. What a life! Frank shared the tangled grouse coverts near his house in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, with me, and later when I decided I wanted to emulate his enviable lifestyle, he shared his wisdom on the writing business with me as he did unselfishly with countless other novice outdoor writers. Frank Woolner's prose came out of his typewriter so clean and pure that he fooled me into believing that writing was easy, a delusion that persisted until I tried doing it myself. He taught me that it wasn't as easy as it looked, and he encouraged me when I needed encouragement. Frank learned to write the same way he learned to catch stripers and hunt grouse, by trying and erring and pondering it, and trying some more. He wrote about hunting and fishing, yes, but he also wrote about the chill of an autumn afternoon and the warmth of the sun's rays when they reflect off a pewter sea. He wrote about robins and bats, wildflowers and stone walls, mosquitoes and tree frogs, which Frank called, delightfully and evocatively, the bells of springtime. I'm not sure how many stories Frank ended up selling after that first one that my father bought. Several hundred, certainly. He also published half a dozen books, including the classic Timberdoodle, the companion piece to Grouse and Grouse Hunting. When Frank Woolner died in 1994, he was still counseling young writers, turning out silky prose on all manner of outdoorsy subjects and sharing his hard-earned wisdom on the comings and goings of striped bass, bluefish, flounder, and weakfish for saltwater sportsmen. And that, I've learned, is how outdoor writers do it. They hunt and they fish, and they wander around in the woods, and they write until they drop. They never retire from doing what's in their blood. Frank Woolner began writing in a simpler time, when the morality of the blood sports was rarely challenged by animal rights activists or anti-gun crusaders. A thoughtful man, however, didn't need a challenge to think about it. I make no apology for being a gunner and an angler, he wrote, but I am a hunter without malice, and maybe a fisher who seeks much more than any limit catch of trout. Today's naturalists might raise an eyebrow at Frank's readiness to shoot grouse predators, but his reasoning was neither simplistic nor hard-headed. Nobody understood the complexities of nature's ways better than Frank Woolner. It is characteristic of well-meaning yet ill-informed nature lovers to insist that all predators are beneficial, he wrote. This product of wishful thinking contains just enough truth to make it dangerous. On the other hand, he understood that extremists who rant that every flesh-eating bird or mammal should be shot on sight betray an abject ignorance of wildlife dynamics. Woolner's middle ground, whether you agree with it or not, is based on a common-sense understanding of nature's interconnectedness, coupled with his unabashed love for ruffed grouse. "If I am hunting in a state where the great horned owl is unprotected," he declared, "I will shoot each and every one that shows in upland cover. I have a bone to pick with do-gooders who have convinced legislatures that the great horned owl should be protected at all seasons. Ill-informed nature lovers are robbing Peter to pay Paul. The ruffed grouse suffers." Grouse and grouse hunting, which has been reprinted several times since 1970, most recently by the Lyons Press with the title Grouse Hunting Strategies, contains equal parts of natural history and hunting lore. The book is proof that a respect for nature and a passion for hunting go hand in hand. As much as he loved grouse, I can vouch for the fact that Frank hunted them hard and never lost track of the point of it. He liked to find birds, he liked to shoot them, and he took pride in being very good at both. His chapters on recognizing likely grouse cover, wing shooting, hunting with and without dogs, and choosing guns and other gear remain as fresh and practical as they were 35 years ago when he wrote them. Grouse hunting is hard work. Frank liked that. It's what made it worthwhile. You will hike the birch woods and struggle through junipers and bullbriar, breast laurel jungles and scrub oak thickets, he wrote. You will pause to take a breather after steaming climbs to beach ridges and plateaus where mountain winds are keen in the pines and hemlocks. If you decide to hunt partridges, one thing is certain: you'll walk. But every grouse hunter is an incurable romantic, he wrote, else he would not seek this bird above all others. Frank Woolner was surely a romantic. Usually, he wrote, during the final afternoon of a grouse hunting season, I take pleasure in tracking a fast-flying pat with my shotgun, and, instead of pressing the trigger, I grin crookedly and lower the piece. There is a secret satisfaction in this sort of thing. I am sure that nobody ever bears witness, and it really doesn't matter. In essence, I have ended the season on my own terms. Frank was also an optimist. So far as this great bird is concerned, he wrote, the elements are seldom hostile. Ruffed grouse conquered their environment centuries before any white man appeared on these shores. They are profligate enough to survive the attentions of wild predator and man. They retreat before the artificial lava flow of steel and cement, but they never concede victory while any fringe of woodland remains. If in the need of it, any game bird graces our wild lands, it will be the cocky, self-assured, and completely independent partridge of the north. Developments in the 35 years since he wrote Grouse and Grouse Hunting might have tempered Woolner's optimism. These days, the peaks in grouse population cycles barely reach what were, in his best days, afield the valleys. Certainly highways and housing developments have stolen habitat from the ruffed grouse. But biologists tell us that the greatest threat to healthy grouse populations is not the bulldozer or the chainsaw, and certainly not the man with a shotgun. Grouse thrive in the tangly edges where woods meet fields. There they find shelter from their enemies and the grasses and grains and leaves and berries that make up their varied diet. The 19th century New England farmers cleared the land, and when Frank Woolner began hunting grouse, he found the abandoned orchards and grapevine tangles, the old pasture grown to clumps of juniper and thornapple and edged with briar and brush, the cellar holes, graveyards and stone walls, and the second-growth birch and poplar hillsides that the pioneers left behind. It all made perfect grouse cover, and the birds were thick. Today, in spite of the encroachments of civilization, New England actually boasts more woodland than it did a century ago. But it's rapidly reverting to mature forest. Tall trees and an open shaded understory make for poor grouse habitat. If he would shoot predators to save grouse, Frank surely would have approved of the proactive approach of the Ruffed Grouse Society, which promotes selective clear-cutting to let the sunshine into the forest and create the openings and thick edges that attract grouse, thus intentionally mimicking what the settlers created inadvertently a century ago. To be entirely effective in this highly technical age, he wrote presciently, Successful grouse management may have to be a massive undertaking and an expensive one. Perhaps a development of forestry practices that will benefit timbermen and hunters alike is one possibility. This is no dream, and it may be realized in the foreseeable future. The knowledge acquired by game biologists in their trysts with failure will be put to good use as natural resources practices mesh for the common good of mankind. Those of us who savor Frank Woolner's words and love the woods in the fall and thrill to the roar of the sudden flush can only hope that his plea for intelligent management of grouse habitat will be heeded. "There is time," he wrote in 1970. Let's hope he was right. Republished with permission from Frank Woolner, A Love Affair with Grouse, by William G. Tapley, 2005. The Upland Almanac, Summer 2005. 2005 by William G. Tapley.